Craftsman style doorway header. There are dozens of these videos on YouTube, but no one is doing it with MDF. This is what it'll look like when we're done. I used a level and drew a line 1/4 inch to give me a good reveal all the way across the top. My side trim is also a 1/4 inch above the doorway. It is important to measure from both the outside edges of the left and right trim. My measurement is 33 inches. The twist on this project is we're going to use MDF, medium density fiberboard. We're on a budget, and real wood is too expensive. This piece is my 3.5 inch header board, 1.5 inch MDF cap. I was able to get some 1 inch eave trim, pretty cheap, so we do have some actual wood here. As well as our 1.5 inch bead trim. This is wood as well. This will be the base of our whole project. Remembering our measurement from outside trim to outside trim was 33 inches. We will measure that. Now that I've marked 33 inches, I will use a speed square to draw a straight line across. For this cut, I'll be using a DeWalt worm drive skill saw. I have adjusted the guard to prevent kickbacks. Our next piece will be the bead. You want to give it a couple looks over to see which side you want to use, which side has any abnormalities. Then we are going to measure 33 inches, but we are going to add 3/8 inch on each side. That's very important for our hangover. Making a header, making a header, making a header. The third piece we are going to cut is our MDF cap. This will be on the top. We want this to hang over 1.25 inches on both sides. That will give us enough room for our eave trim. Our measurement for this cut will be 35.5 inches. That gives us the 33 inches of the header board and the 1.25 inch hangover on both sides. Yo, we making a header. I got my boys base, eave, and cap. Mess with us and DeWalt will cut you back. You heard? The last piece to cut will be the eave trim. This is another one you want to look very closely to make sure there's no abnormalities in the wood. Because these cuts will be angled, I'm going to use a miter box with several angles preset. When using a miter box, it's best to use a hacksaw for this type of cut. At this point, I'm going to line the wood up to cut just the front edge off. That way I can get my first angle. Now that I have my first cut, I have my first angle. My measurement will start at the bottom end, the shortest part. Right at the start of the primer is where our measurement will start. We want this piece to be the identical length of our header, which is 33 inches. After marking our eave trim at 33 inches, we're going to place it in the miter box very carefully. We're going to have to line it up on their lines exactly where our mark is. Here, I'll show you right here. Right there, I got my line matched with their line. Now that I've matched up the measurement with the proper angle, it's time to cut. After our cut, we have a nice sharp edge, and our line matches up with our cut perfectly. Now that we've made all our cuts, let's go over our pieces again. We have the cap piece, the eave piece, the bead, which is the bottom, and our header, 3.5 inch MDF. Cheap. On the bead trim, I made a 3/8 mark on both edges so that I know how much overhang I need. I also made a 5/8 inch line all the way across so I can pre-drill. I'm going to pre-drill my materials. When using MDF, it has a tendency to split unless you pre-drill. I have chosen a drill bit that's just a tad bit smaller than the nails I'll be using. 4D 1.5" shank nails. As this is driller night, we got ourselves a beat and a header, hope it fits right. Driller night. Once you're pre-drilled, line up your 3/8 mark so that you have the correct overhang on both sides. Then you can nail. With each nail, make sure you are staying flush as you move along. Now that you've done the bead, it's time to move on to the cap. Make sure you pre-drill the MDF cap as well. We don't want any splitting. Now it's time to nail on our cap. Check to make sure that you line up the marks for the 1.25" overhang on both ends. You can now nail the same way you did the bead. After you put the cap on, it starts to take shape. Now we can add the eave trim. Once you place the eave trim underneath the cap, you start to see the true magnificence of this type of header. Line up the edges very carefully. If we did everything right, the header and the eave trim should be the same size. Now we will pre-drill the eave trim. Because of the rounded design on your eave trim, take care not to damage the lines. I went back outside and cut the corner pieces for the eave trim. There was a lot of swearing and a lot of wasted material. But the end result was 2 perfect end pieces. You will need to take extra precaution when pre-drilling the end trim pieces, especially since they're so small and extremely hard to make. Make sure there are no gaps when installing your corner pieces. I will now use a nail set to sink the nails below the surface of the MDF so that later I can apply wood putty and then sand. Now that our header is complete, it's time to install it. To attach the header above the door, I'm going to use 2-inch 6D shank nails. I found a drill bit to match that size. Take a second to make sure that your 3/8 overhang sticks out past the left and right trims. That's what all that measuring was for. You can now pre-drill the header for wall installation. One more final check of your overhangs and you are ready to put in your last nails. It's now time to use your nail set to push those nails below the surface. The last step will be to wood putty and sand before you paint. Craftsman style door header made with MDF. Now that's building on a budget.